By all accounts, Joe Biden is doing poorly right now. Donald Trump's return to the presidency almost seems imminent. If you look at Joe Biden's approval rating, you can see that it's at disapprove plus 17.2%. And if you want to find a poll suggesting that Joe Biden is approved of, you have to go all the way back to May of 2023. That is more than 9 months ago. Furthermore, in the general election polling, you can see that Donald Trump is ahead on the popular vote by 2 percentage points, which is ridiculously concerning for Joe Biden as he won the popular vote in 2020 by 4.5%. Furthermore, he barely won the presidency, so this is really concerning. But against a generic Republican, Joe Biden does even worse. You can see here Joe Biden's actually trailing by 11% against a generic Republican on the popular vote, which means that if this is true, Joe Biden will lose in a landslide. Furthermore speaking, independents are backing Joe Biden with just 17% of the vote. He is losing independents by 26%. Black voters are only voting for Joe Biden by 40%. That is again a huge warning sign. Now here are the safe states filled in for you. We're going to get right in today's video. The margins are in the pinned comment as well as the description. So let's start off with the generic Republicans' likely states, and we'll actually see a lot of them. Starting off, we're going to see the states of Iowa and Ohio. Now, I think with Trump here, they could actually be safe states, but against a generic Republican, this is one of the two states. These are the two states that I think generic Republican won't do that well compared to Donald Trump. Obviously, they're going to still do very, very well because Joe Biden is just very unpopular, and the national polling average definitely does not look good for Joe Biden right now. Nevertheless speaking, I think that this will be about 11 to 12 point win for the generic Republicans, so on the verge of a safe margin. Now, Florida and Texas. Both these states could be likely or safe states. I think Florida and Texas will both go to the generic Republican here by about 11 points. Now, if you look at both these states here, they both voted for Donald Trump by single digits, Texas by 5.6, and Florida by 3.3. Now, in the state of Florida, this is a state heavily trending towards the Republicans. Ron DeSantis, the Republican governor of the state, won the state by 17%. That is a very impressive margin, considering this state used to be a bellwether just about a decade ago. In the state of Texas here, this is a trending blue state, but under Joe Biden, really there's no shot that Democrats end up actually winning the state, especially in 2024, and with all the polling we're seeing against a generic Republican, he might as well lose the state by a safe margin. Now, the next likely Republican state here is not actually a state, it is a district. Maine's 2nd Congressional District will probably go for the Republican Party by about 11 to 12 points in this scenario, similar to states like Iowa and Ohio. Now, the next state here in the likely Republican column and the final state, the state of North Carolina. This will be a state that goes to the Republicans by about a likely margin, or about 6 to 7 points. In 2020, Biden actually barely lost the state against Donald Trump. Trump did not secure a majority in the state, falling just short. However, in 2024 here, I do expect a generic Republican to do very well in the Charlotte suburbs and some of the Raleigh suburbs, causing the generic Republican to be able to barely actually lose some of the suburbs that Trump lost by more than 10 percentage points, and as a result, win the state comfortably in 2024. Now, going to the likely Democratic states here, now we don't actually have a lot. We have Colorado, New Mexico, and Virginia. All three of these states voted for Joe Biden in 2020 by about between 10 points and 13.5 points. Now, some of these states here will definitely be more competitive than others. I think Colorado is closer to the safe end, closer to about a double-digit victory. I think that Donald Trump or any Republican will still make this race about single digits, but it's still going to be a relatively solid one. But in the state of New Mexico, for example, the race is more contentious. We could see Joe Biden winning the state by under 5%, and it could actually fall in the lead margin, but I do still believe that Joe Biden will win the state of New Mexico by about 5%, which is still narrowly in the likely margin. Now that wraps up all the likely states for both sides. Now before we continue here, I want to tell you guys about my channel. 96% of you are not subscribed to my channel, which is a ridiculously concerning number. I would like to get this number to below 80%. And if you want free election content, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Now go back to the lean and tilt states here. Starting with the state of Nevada here. Now, Nevada is a state that definitely a Republican would be able to do pretty well. Joe Biden won the state by 2.4% in 2020, and his strength in some of the areas, as well as the Democratic strength in general, in areas like Clark County, have been shrinking. We see that, for example, Clark County in 2020, despite the overall national environment being a lot less favorable for Donald Trump, this county still shifted 1.4% to the Republican Party from 2016. Some of the rural areas also shifted towards the Republicans. That really, Democrats are losing their grip in the state of Nevada. Nevada consistently votes for Democrats by a pretty slim margin. In 2024, I think against a generic Republican would definitely win the state of Nevada. Now going to the state of Arizona. The state of Arizona here, this is a state that's not as solid in the Republican column as some of the other traditionally Republican states like Texas or Georgia. However, the state of Arizona here will still be a pretty solid win for the Republicans, although there's a lot of people here that are trending towards the Democrats, and there's a lot of voters outside of Phoenix in the suburban areas that really do not like Trump. They're going to vote for generic Republican. Furthermore, just the entire polling situation, as well as the approval rating of Joe Biden, suggests that Joe Biden's definitely going to lose the state of Arizona against a generic Republican who are able to appeal to more moderates. Therefore, I will give the state of Arizona here to the Republican Party by about 4 to 5%, which is in a higher amount of a lean margin. Now going to the state of Georgia. Now, a generic Republican won't be able to do as well with some of the rural voters that Trump really based his support in 2020. However, a generic Republican will be able to do very, very well with some of the suburban regions around Atlanta that really trended away from the Republicans back in 2020. For example, in areas like Newton County, in an area like Henry County, or in some of the larger counties like Cobb County, Gwinnett County, these are all areas that trended to the Democratic Party by double digits. And with a more moderate Republican, we could see some suburban reversion, and that will be sufficient to definitely win the state and pretty much win the state comfortably. I'm debating between a lean and likely margin, and really based on where Joe Biden is at right now, it will probably be closer to a likely margin, but I'm still going to put it in lean just to be safe here. As you can see here, the generic Republican is already at 268 electoral votes, despite a lot of votes left to be filled in. Now the next state also has 2 electoral votes. It will be Maine's at-large congressional vote. Now, as you can see here, Joe Biden won the state by just over 9% in 2020, suggesting that the state might be flippable. Furthermore speaking, there's a lot of white voters in the state, and it is also pretty rural, especially upstate in New England. However, it's a state that's still very hard for the Republicans to flip because there's still a lot more voters in the 1st congressional district, which is bluer than there is in the 2nd congressional district, which is a bit strange, but it will go to the generic Democrat Joe Biden by about 3%. Now the next area is Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. Now I think that Donald Trump here probably will lose, but I think that for a generic Republican, they're probably going to hold this district. Although it's a very urban district, it is trending blue because it's against Donald Trump, not because it's against the Republican Party. So the urban Omaha district will give the generic Republican enough to tie the Electoral College. But the Republican's going to do better than that. In the state of Wisconsin, the next state to cover here, Joe Biden won the state by just 0.7% in 2020, in fact, closer to 0.6%. This was an exceptionally close race. Just 20,000 votes separated Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And a generic Republican will do a lot better in the WOW counties, which is Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington County, enough so to win the state. They're also going to do quite well compared to Donald Trump here in some of the more urban and suburban regions. Though they might turn off some rural voters, that ultimately won't matter because I think generic Republican will probably win the state by about 3 to 4 percentage points. Now going to the state of Michigan. Joe Biden's approval rating and polling is pretty much just terrible in the state of Michigan. Although he won the state by 3 in 2020, a lot of suburban voters are feeling disillusioned with the Democratic Party, specifically Joe Biden, and they want an alternative. Some of them don't think the alternative should be Donald Trump, but they certainly support a Republican. And therefore, there's just going to be a lot of voters voting against Joe Biden because of his arguably weak cognitive abilities, and therefore we're going to give the state here also to the Republicans by a similar margin to the state of Wisconsin, maybe slightly lower, and also about 3 percentage points. Now, going to the state of Minnesota here, we're going in reverse order. We see that the generic Republican is already at 294 electoral votes, plenty to win the presidency. Now, the state of Minnesota here, I'm kind of torn. This state has the longest Democratic voting history, which would suggest that Democrats would win it consistently. However, Hillary Clinton almost lost the state in 2016, and she still won the popular vote by more than 2 percentage points. However, speaking, Joe Biden has some strengths in the state. The state has a huge college-educated white area in the Minneapolis area, and some of these counties, such as Anoka or Washington or Dakota, these are heavily trending blue regions. And in general, this is a state where Democrats probably didn't have the best demographics a couple decades ago and still won. Right now, I'd say that Joe Biden probably still wins the state, despite doing very poorly nationally. But he's going to win the state by less than a point, which would be the most competitive this state has been since 1984, where Walter Mondale barely won the state of Minnesota. There's 2 states left, the states of Pennsylvania and New Hampshire. Let's start off with Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania is also a close state. Joe Biden won the state by 1.2% in 2020, a rather close margin, so he does not really have a lot of room to lose. And there's a lot of rural regions in the state that gives Republicans a lot of votes. Now, Joe Biden has 2 population centers to bang on. It's the Philadelphia area, as well as Montgomery County and Delaware County, and also Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is located. Now, I think that Joe Biden is going to turn off some Democrats, and a generic Republican will not get as much turnout in the rural regions. All things being considered, though, there's still a lot of rural voters in the state of Pennsylvania, and in general, because Joe Biden only has less than 1.2% of the room to actually fall in, I still believe that a generic Republican will probably win the state of Pennsylvania just based on the polling, just based on all the statistics that suggest that Joe Biden's probably not going to win re-election. Now, finally, in the state of New Hampshire here, New Hampshire is also a close state in this scenario. It voted for Biden by 7, but again, there's a lot of room for Democrats to fall in. We saw that many Republicans are not, and independents as well, are not that happy with Donald Trump based on the Republican primary, but I think a generic Republican will do pretty well in the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire is generally previously, a couple decades ago, was a red state and then trended blue, and now a slightly blue leading state. But blue leading state in such a bad environment for Democrats probably will equal red state at the very end. Furthermore, all of these counties are pretty competitive, so there's a lot of potential opportunities for Republicans to gain votes. And generally, I would now believe that the generic Republican will also win New Hampshire, which gives Joe Biden 221 electoral votes to the generic Republican at 317. Popular vote-wise, I think it will be close to even, but I think that the generic Republican actually pulls ahead because, again, the polling is so bad for Joe Biden for me to believe that a generic Republican will lose. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to consider subscribing to my YouTube channel for quality election predictions. And anyways, thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.